Hello there, Damla. Lovely to see you.
It's same here. Okay, let's talk about Mitras because now we have some news about Zerzevan Castle excavation and they found some new inscriptions. So before talk about these new findings, could you
Yeah.
please tell us about why this area is important for Mitraism and how this belief was born?
Well, Mithras is a very archaic god from Central Asian steppes. And from there, he went into India and into Iran. So we have parallel traditions with this deity. Um, when we think about this was a deeply animistic culture. And so when people say, well, what does God, Mithra represent? Well, it's contracts and agreements. But he's not the God of those things. He is those things himself. So that whenever an agreement is made, he's present in that. So he's kind of woven into the texture of life. And so this God descended from Central Asian steppes amongst the shamanic, uh, nomadic culture that moved through the Caucasus Mountains into Iran. And the first group was the Medes, and their tribal grouping, and one of their tribes was the Magi. And this is a hereditary caste of priests. So they always intermarried. They're very, Um, and the Medes were replaced by the Achaemenid, the next wave of nomadic, semi-nomadic peoples, and eventually by the Parthians. And so all of these people continued moving across Iran, Mesopotamia, they destroyed the Assyrian Empire, and into Anatolia. So we first see the god appears in the Bronze Age, Middle Bronze Age, in a peace treaty between the Hittites and the Mitanni. The Mitanni were the Indo-Iranian tribe. But there's no mention of this god's name in the Hittite records. He doesn't belong to their pantheon, which is extraordinary since they seem to have assimilated every single god they ever encountered into their own pantheon. They didn't with this one. And nor is there any visibility of a Mithra in Palaic or Luwian to the west. So definitely Indo-Aryan or Indo-Iranian deity. There's no doubt about it. So, with the Achaemenid Empire, which conquered Anatolia between 550 and 330, roughly, um, the Magi accompanied the ruling elite and were their priests, and therefore they were the ones who enacted the rites to Mithra. And so he's firmly, as late as the second century CE, Strabo and Pausanias both describe the rites of Mazdaism, essentially, which is the Persian faith, being enacted. This is like 5 centuries after the Achaemenid Empire is over. They're still practicing. And I don't know when they stopped practicing. Maybe they never did.
Maybe they are still practicing.
Still in Cappadocia, Commagene, they're still practicing. Who knows? Because one of the defining features of their ritual was the use of the plant spirit deity Homer. And Homer was a god, actually, but it's also a powerful entheogenic substance. And that was central to all their rituality. So it was part of their healing practice, it was part of their medicine cabinet, and it was also a powerful entheogenic that brought them into connection with divinity in its strongest form. So these rites are being enacted in the name of Ahura Mazda and Mithra. And so throughout this period, although deep in Iran, there's like a revolution going on with the religion, it's moving from polytheism to monotheism as the reforms of Zoroaster are slowly absorbed. In Anatolia, it didn't take. So the Achaemenids were still polytheistic, and their prime gods, Ahura Mazda and Mithra, and also a goddess, which is really odd. Antaeus, who was like an Aphrodite deity.
Mhm.
So they had a kind of trinity at the top. And these three gods, you see them represented in Nemruta. In
So
fact,
you are saying that Komagene actually she is not Komagene.
actually, the original deity is Ishtar.
Okay.
And it's like in this 1,000-year passage of these nomadic tribes through Iran into the Tigris Euphrates Valley and those ancient Sumerian and so on. They picked up a goddess along the way. And she went with them all the way into Anatolia. And on Nemrutdar, she appears as the goddess of Khomeini, actually. But in Mazdaism, as it was practiced by the Achaemenids, she was actually Anataeus, and Anataeus Aphrodite, they called her.
Oh.
So yeah, so that's kind of localization. There's a very strong tendency in the Khomeini kingship to localize and universalize at the same time, which sounds like a contradiction, but actually they were embracing everybody because throughout the Persian Empire years, they had remained an elite, very isolated. Everybody in Anatolia went about their customary rites, traditions. They were not affected by the Persians. As long as they paid their taxes, didn't matter. That's all. That's all that mattered. So by the time of the Hellenistic kingdoms, that Persian Empire had gone. So the rulers of the Eastern Anatolian Hellenistic kingdoms had to make they, a new political architecture for themselves, actually. They couldn't rely on the Persian army or anything like that. And that new architecture meant they had to embrace everybody and
Mhm.
all the gods, that meant. So that's what they did. So you have these long streams of God names in Khomeini, and
Yeah.
especially in Nemrut, the Helios, Mithras, Apollo.
Hermes.
Yeah, long streams of names for all of the gods. And that's what they're doing there. So Mithra was always integral to this religion. I say from the steppes, we're now 3,000 years on, something like that, and is still strongly represented. But with this blending with the Hellenistic culture now, instead of sitting above it as the Persian rulers did, they now had to integrate with it. And I believe what they did is integrate Mazdaism with Hellenistic mystery rites,
Mhm.
because the Mazdaism already had a very strong esoteric dimension to it.
Yeah.
And the result is that we see these tunnels deep, like at Arsamea on Nymphos, and in Duluk,
Mhm.
and in Zerzevan Castle, Calais. We see these like caves excavated, and it's very difficult to date some of them because of a subsequent Roman presence.
Mhm.
Um, but if my understanding is right, these caves, some of them go back before the Persian invasion. Some of them are contemporary with the Hellenistic rulers of
Mhm.
Khomeini, um, but all of them predate the Roman arrival, and that includes Zerzevan, Calais.
Yes.
Okay. So it's the Romans may have added some architecture to the cave, so to speak, some
Mhm.
shaping. But these were originally, I believe, Hellenistic elite mystery cult, which was part of the outcome of this assimilation of traditions, actually, Persian and Anatolian, that characterized these Hellenistic kingdoms. So that's a very long answer to a short question.
But it was so deep and detailed answer, so I appreciate it. So, could you please tell us a little bit more about the importance of Zerzevan Castle based on Mithras?
Based on Mithras. Well, it was primarily a military garrison. So originally a Parthian military garrison. Parthians, of course, inflicted the worst defeat ever on the Roman army. And at the time of Septimius Severus, which is like the second century CE, so a couple of centuries later, the Romans retook it and garrisoned it. And I think it was garrisoned by the Legion or Legio Parthica 1 and 2. And they were like permanent garrison there. But we're now looking at the second century CE. So we have this accumulation of religions actually, whereas the Romans had adopted Jupiter Dolicanus and Mithras from Duluc in probably the first century BCE, first century CE. Since then, we've had the rise of Christianity, and especially in places like Syria and the Levant, it had its, so to speak, stronghold.
Mhm.
So the use of these Syrian legions to man or garrison Zerzevan castle appears to have brought another layer of religiosity into that already multi-layered defensive works. And that brings us to the inscription. Okay. So what we appear to have with the inscription is an attempt to de-sanctify the Mithraic sanctuary. That's to say, to cure it of its magical vibration to the ancient god Mithras by carving crucifix in it and an inscription. And I think you know what the inscription says. I can't recall it now.
Yeah. We can edit later
Okay.
because I don't remember word by word.
Okay. So that's the story, really. It's a very long and detailed story, and you can't just tackle it on a say, so to speak, a religious basis. It's tied up with history, political history, military history, um, and also the big sweep of human spiritual development is woven through it as we've moved towards more monotheistic forms, and the old gods have been turned into aspects of the major divinity, qualities of the divinity. So all of that process is so to speak, running throughout this tale.
As far as I know, there are also so many different Mitraiums in Anatolia, but I don't think that they have found that kind of inscription to,
Yeah,
yeah.
not only that, but I think most of them are just caves. And some of them were definitely inherited from the mother goddess,
Mm-hmm.
that earlier
Baba.
cult of Cybele or Magna Mater under the Romans. Um, so it's very, very difficult to disentangle the layers.
Mm-hmm.
What we are lacking is that defining feature of the Western or Roman cult of Mithras, which is the figure of the bull killing scene. It's called the Tauroctony.
Mm-hmm.
And although there are a couple, I mean, in Duluc and in Zerzevan, the traces of that carved into the
Mm-hmm.
cave, um, there's not enough detail. We can't tell when that carving was done, whether it predates or postdates the Roman presence. And there's not enough detail in it to say that it's definitely the predecessor of the rich Roman iconography of the second century CE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have 3 centuries um, where it's almost invisible and then suddenly comes fully formed in Rome in the second century. The earliest full tauroctony is there. But again, we can't account for the simplicity on the one hand of, say, Attis Mithras, there's a Hellenistic god for you, from Pontus and the Bosporan kingdom, uh, performing the tauroctony with no accompanying symbols whatsoever, to the very rich astrologically themed tauroctonies of Rome. So again, there's a transformation process that's gone on via the Hellenistic culture. And then presumably Rome had enough money. They were rich enough to create these fantastic marble representations for themselves, but they're largely absent in Hellenistic Anatolia. And it's a very strange feature because it's obvious the cult came from here, but we just don't have that rich iconography that Western uh, versions of the cult have. It's very curious.
So you think in the future we can find new places or new evidence about Mithras in Anatolia? You think it's
Well,
possible?
there's a huge amount of research that needs to be done. Like there's, 20, 30 sites which are either definitely Mithraic or suspected to be, but I've not seen a systematic treatment of all of them. So that's one problem. The excavation, the archaeology lags behind there. It's not. I don't feel it's been a major. There's so many rich layers to look at in Anatolia. There's like too much rich cake. But that's one layer that I feel can be explored in the future. I still feel deeply that there's a difference, there's a disconnect between the Mithras cult amongst the Hellenistic ruling elite and the Mithraic cult amongst the Romans,
Mm.
because in Anatolia it was an elite cult. That's to say, for the royal family. In Rome, it's slaves and freedmen. Incredibly democratic. So the other thing that I in my first book on this subject, I found that all the iconography in the Roman cult of Mithras could be traced to Orphism, and that's again a deeply Hellenistic uh, thematic context. But it still didn't produce the iconography in the Hellenistic world. That's the strange thing, and that is a genuine puzzle.
Yes, and there are still so many pieces to explore, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of them is the possible impact of Mazdaism on this,
Mhm.
and that's something I'm exploring with the present work, and I'm looking in depth at the Eastern Hellenistic kingdoms, the ones which were under the rulership of descendants of the Achaemenid or Persian Empire, because they were the, so to speak, balancing Hellenism and Mazdaism. And that's the most likely context from which the cult initially emerged. So that's very exciting research to do. Nemrut Da is kind of central to this. It's pivotal. And this was
Mhm.
recognized by Roger Beck, one of the leading scholars of Mithraism.
Mhm.
Um, but he seemed to think that the celestial arrangements of Nemrut Da would throw light on the cult. Now, I have up-to-date research on the orientation of the statues, um, and it shows a different picture. So I think we're going to see a new turn of the wheel as we explore the implications of these celestial alignments within Khomeini to the emergence of the cult of Mithras. That'll be in my forthcoming book.
I'm looking forward to read that book
Yeah.
when it is
Well,
coming.
I hope it'll be finished the end of this month and we'll edit it. And I hope it'll be in the autumn winter schedule from Theon. Um, inshallah, as they say.
Inshallah. Okay, Peter, thank you so much
You're
for this
welcome.
interview. See you
You're
soon.
welcome. See you soon. Bye bye.